Merry Christmas, everybody. It is the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegraywolf.com. I hope all of you are having a very Merry Christmas. I know I have been a very good one for me, and I hope that all of you got everything that you wanted and are continuing to get everything that you want under the tree, and if not, we've got a whole nother year to make up for it. So, got a lot going on today. Wanted to do obviously something a little Christmas themed, which we're going to do for this week's question coming up. But we have an interesting question that many of you had some great comments on from last week about Goldeneye 64 and kind of recapturing the magic. And I think a lot of us, a lot of you guys out there had some similar experiences to me, and I think many of you had some unique experiences, things I probably hadn't thought of yet. So I'm going to go through some of the, as I always do, go through some of the comments that you guys provided for me. I'll give you some of my own little commentary on the whole Goldeneye phenomenon, and we will move on to the question for next week, which I think will have you all looking back into some of the best Christmases you've ever had. Now, first, before I get back into the question, I always take a little bit of time, at least when I remember and when I write things down and when all these, I guess influences come together. I want to welcome new members. So today we've got two to speak of. We've got Commander Cobalt. Welcome to you. By the way, really cool name. I think that's neat. Commander Cobalt just kind of rolls off the tongue, and it's very easy for me to say, which for those of you that don't have very easy to say names, it's not like I like you any less. I love all of my commenters equally. You all know that. But, Commander Cobalt just kind of rolls off the tongue. So welcome, Commander Cobalt. Also, Old World Gamer, welcome to you as well. Definitely looked up some of the work you've been doing with reviews, and I think that it's great that we have kind of an expanding community of folks that are a part of the Weekly Wringer that do their own kinds of critique and do their own game reviews. So welcome to you as well. Now, this has been an interesting phenomenon for me. Now, I realized we had a little bit of commentary later on in the Weekly Wringer, and I forget who specifically talked. It might have been Nightcrawler. Sorry if I messed that up, but talked about the idea of kind of me getting this idea from Goldeneye Reloaded and then asking the question, what's is really more akin to maybe what I should have been asking for the Goldeneye remake for the Wii, which I think is correct. But, a lot of times as it is, it takes, before I ask a question about something in the Weekly Wringer, I need a little bit of time to digest it myself. I actually downloaded the demo for Goldeneye Reloaded because I don't own a Wii, and so maybe that's why it came onto my screen when it did, my radar screen. In any case, I think it's a very valid question, right? For those of you that played Goldeneye 64 and it was kind of a big part of your video gaming history, let's say, I think we can all agree that it was a landmark game. A game that really changed a lot, and a game that I think made, at the very least, made certain kinds of first-person shooters more acceptable to a much larger audience than I think it had enjoyed before, especially on consoles, unlike on the PC, where it was really very old hat by the time Goldeneye debuts. First-person shooters were very much, I think, very played out and had their own kind of renaissance going on at the same time. So, that's really not what the question was about. I didn't ask whether you think Goldeneye was a great game. I think everybody knows Goldeneye was a great game. But instead I wanted to ask you a question about trying to recapture the magic. And the reason why I say that is because there have been so many times I've heard developers, I've heard publishers like Nintendo say, or even gamers, folks that I respect immensely, say that this game coming out is going to be the new Goldeneye, or I played this game and it's the new Goldeneye, or it does some of the same things that Goldeneye did. And it seems that Goldeneye is such a great experience that it really sits as the, again, no pun intended, gold standard for many of the first-person shooter games put out for console. That being said, I've heard that many times, and I'm not sure I've ever seen a game really recapture the magic from Goldeneye. And so what I asked last week that many of you responded to was a question about whether you think any game will ever really recapture the magic of Goldeneye. And I completely left it open because maybe some games that have already come out, games that have come out, in many of your opinions, have done some of the really reclaiming of that magic of Goldeneye. And I was definitely open to that as well. But it just seemed odd to me that there were so many games that came out that were supposed to recapture the magic, as it was the kind of gold standard for all video gaming, evidently. And I'm not sure if any of them really ever lived up to the billing. And whether they did or whether they did not, I was very interested in seeing what many of you said in terms of really bringing out what is so great about Goldeneye. And I think we did that in droves. So I love that we have a very educated base out there. So great and appreciated comments as always, guys. So let me start off. I have to pick a few, because I always do, to go through and kind of talk about some of the things I thought that were great from the community. This week, let's start with Lenoir. Interestingly enough, talking about the split screen phenomenon. You know, the idea of having multiplayer that happens from a single screen with a bunch of people in the room that you can actually actively reach over and punch when things went wrong, or in the case of me and Rue, you know, probably screaming about how someone is looking at someone else's screen, you know, so on and so forth. You guys that lived it know exactly what I'm talking about. But in any case, the idea of the split screen multiplayer and the idea of the kind of communal game that brought a lot of people into the same room to play each other in kind of tournament-style gameplay, I think is one of the really distinguishing factors of Goldeneye. There weren't a whole lot of games that did that kind of thing before, but there certainly, I don't think there were any games that did it nearly as well as Goldeneye did to that point. There certainly was a lot of multiplayer games to that point, but there weren't a lot of multiplayer games that had you all sitting in the same room that were actually active and engaging and could be enjoyed by everyone involved. And I think there have been games that do that, that have done that since. But, you know, so maybe those games have recaptured the magic of Goldeneye. That being said, I don't think that's the most important feature. I think it is a feature of Goldeneye, but I don't think it's most important. So if other games have captured it, which I think they have, I don't think we can say that they've recaptured the magic from Goldeneye yet. Maybe I'm pushing my own opinion too early here in the Weekly Wringer. Anyway, now let's go to Prangabe, who mentioned that actually there probably have been a few games that have recaptured the magic of Goldeneye, and one of them, the first one that came to Chris Pranger's mighty brain, is Halo. And as is the case with most comments in the Weekly Wringer from Chris Pranger, I agree wholeheartedly. You know, Halo really does some of the awesome work. And someone said later on, it's not that it really rekindled the magic of Goldeneye, but it filled the vacated void that was left by Goldeneye in 1995, I think, 1996. And, you know, Halo comes back in 2001 and just kind of jumps right into that, to that void. It is one of those games where you can sit in the same room, have a party that just focuses all around one game, and you don't have to be in disparate locations. You all get in the same room, you cook up a couple pizzas, you get a case of soda or beer or whatever, what have you, and you just all kind of get down and get playing. And ironically now, because of some of the TVs and the sizes of TVs that people have now, split screen is not the worst thing in the world. I know when Goldeneye came out, a lot of TVs weren't necessarily that huge unless you had some kind of projection screen, so on and so forth, or you were using a projector, which some people were back then. There really wasn't a whole lot in terms of being able to play split screen that would allow you a whole lot of freedom to see things. That being said, we made do and we liked it. Now I'm starting to feel crotchety. But anyway, I think Prangabe makes a great point. You know, other games have kind of stepped up, and Halo tends to be one of them. And I thought there's a kind of a systemic breakdown of four kind of unique attributes of Goldeneye that Halo gets right. And I have to say, I think I agree with every single one of them. I feel like there is And multiplayer gaming, as I talked about in the same room, happens to be one of those. I think there are also a few distinguishing features that are worth mentioning there that are also really cool. But in any case, rather than kind of go through all four of them, let's just say, I think Halo does, in many ways, what Goldeneye set out to do and achieved, even though Halo doesn't ever really start with Goldeneye kind of as the model. Remember, Halo was conceived as a completely different third-person kind of game that eventually evolved into a first-person shooter that ended up implementing a lot of things from Goldeneye. All right. Now, but I will say this. Halo did have the benefit of seeing a lot of Goldeneye successors. Perfect Dark, the Free Radical design Time Splitters. It got to see a lot of these games come forth that were supposed to be spiritual successors to Goldeneye. And you could see kind of glimpses of brilliance, but never that kind of essence. And I'm going to get to another thing I think really distinguishes Goldeneye in a minute, and why I think Halo kind of picks it up, but might not get all the way to where we're trying to get to. Shirao Wolf said that Goldeneye equals, or let's say fulfills a kind of nostalgic sentimentality that is there for a lot of games that you probably played when you were younger, and that one of the reasons why we can't recapture the magic is because we're chasing the dragon, right? We're going after something that's never recapturable. You can't get the same experience twice, right? I certainly had not considered that when I asked this question, and I thank Shirao Wolf for bringing this up, because I think it's a very good point. Several of you brought this up later on, echoing the sentiments, and it seemed very logical to me. I'm not sure why I never came up with it. But I've always just assumed that GoldenEye really was that great of a game. I never really assumed that it was mostly due to a kind of nostalgic connection from when I was a kid that made it great. And I'm not saying that that's what Shirao Wolf is trying to say with his comment. What I am saying, or what I think he was saying, let's say, is that anything that you play with that kind of nostalgic bent is not necessarily ever going to be rekindled. In other words, you're never going to jump into another game, a new game, that has the same essence and the same magic of a previous game, because it's a unique experience. You can make a game that's very similar, a game that is, redone in the same kind of vein, a la GoldenEye Reloaded, and it's never going to have the same magic because it isn't the same kind of newness. It isn't the same experience. There are definitely differences in terms of your own criticality, and Mr. K mentioned that as well. We've really developed as a kind of critically aware group of gamers, and jumping into a game that's been remade or redone for technology, it might never, as a matter of fact, that's Shirao Wolf's point, might never ever get to that same kind of level. I absolutely agree with that, and I think it's entirely possible that to ask a question like, can we recapture the magic from an old game, is kind of a stupid question, because there's no way we could ever do that. That being said, there are great things about games that can be replicated in ways that allow us to establish a kind of newness. Allow us to establish a kind of rapport with games that I think all of us have found with many experiences, and several of you said this as well. And I think even Shirao Wolf said this. We come into certain experiences with other games. For me, it could be a game like BioShock. BioShock does awesome things. Half-Life does awesome things. The first time you turn it on, you start playing the game, you go, this is different. It might have the same kind of formula as other games, but it's different. It feels different. It's immersing as a different kind of... Did I say immersing? I don't think immersing is a word. It's immersive in ways that other games may have not been immersive. It has certain kinds of mechanics that other games just haven't been able to replicate. Or, as many of you said with GoldenEye, in terms of a control standpoint, it does it well. It does it simply, elegantly, and to the point. And more importantly, it works. And so you have that, all those pieces kind of coming together that develop a unique experience. And so maybe we'll never get the same experience, but I think we can all understand that the first time we get a really, really good one, what that feels like. And I think if we didn't feel that, if you guys didn't feel that, you wouldn't be at this site right now probably watching this video, because I think we all find that somehow